Well, I think there's a natural affinity with people who have suffered colonization. There's almost an instinctive sympathy, solidarity. Uh, so we have been occupied. We're still partitioned. The British still claim sovereignty, even though it's conditional now under the terms of the Good Friday Agreement, but they still claim sovereignty over this part of Ireland. And while I think the current desperate genocidal assault on the people of Palestine is in excess to what happened here in my lifetime, if we go farther back in our history, we find the same things happened, that there was genocide, that there was starvation, that there was division, occupation, settlers were brought in. So when you have that history, then, as I say, there's a natural affinity with others. We had that natural affinity with people in South Africa at the height of the anti-apartheid, with people in Cuba. With that natural affinity with the American civil rights marchers, and with other struggles in Latin America, and particularly, I suppose, over the last 40 years with the Palestinian cause. Well, I would imagine not. I would imagine that things have become more polarized because of the conflict. You don't have that intensity of, how many deaths? Is it, 48,000, perhaps 68,000, perhaps 70,000. We don't know we don't know how many people have been killed, and tens of thousands of people injured, and just the complete devastation of Gaza City, just the complete obliteration of places that we had been, and incidentally, the last time I was there wasn't long after another series of bombing attacks. We visited hospitals which had been bombed, and we met surgeons, and we met health workers, and we met community workers and others who had all been subjected to the bombing of that time, and that was as of nothing compared to what we've seen in the last 8 years. Well, first of all, you always have to be very respectful of the right of other people who are engaged in struggle to determine what form their struggle will take and what their strategy might be, and so on. So it would be impertinent if someone like me went to meet other people in struggle and said to them, you should be doing this or you should be doing that. Having said that, of course, in terms of fraternal discussion, because see, what's important isn't the organizations. What's important is the people of Palestine. So the Sinn Féin position is very simple and straightforward. We believe in self-determination. We believe that people have the right to determine their own future, the right to freedom, and the right to independence. That's the principled position, and it's also the big issue, the big democratic issue facing folks in recent times, and probably for a very long time. So you see that in relation to Russia and Ukraine, you see it in terms of other parts of the world, and you see it particularly in terms of the right of the people of Palestine who are being denied their right to determine their own future. Now, do we discuss how struggle should progress in a respectful way? So our position is, again, we believe that the duty of all the Palestinian organizations and all the leaderships, right across from the political, from the resistance movement, right through civic society, should be to develop a national platform of unity. If the people are supreme, then the will of the people to determine their own future has to be the imperative of all those who are engaged in struggle. And there's a duty, therefore, to try and create that national unity, to try and create that national platform around the democratic right of the people of Palestine to determine their own future, the right to a free Palestinian state, but also a viable Palestinian state. And then further to that, the need to have a global position based upon, not say it's a distraction, is Hamas right, is Fatah right, that they're all distractions. Is this group a terrorist? Is this group a freedom fighter? They're all total and absolute distractions. I mean, if we know nothing, we know on the eve potentially of a pause or a ceasefire in hostilities that Hamas is still there. We know that the Israelis had to speak to Hamas, even if it's close proximity talks. That was always inevitable. There was no possibility of, when you're under occupation, of totally and absolutely obliterating any resistance to that occupation, because resistance, just as day follows night, resistance will follow occupation. So what does all that boil down to? It boils down to the need for a united Palestinian position. Now, what that consists of is up to the people involved, but that I would argue, and that's Sinn Féin's firm position. And Sinn Féin is in ongoing contact, particularly intensely since this latest outbreak of hostilities, but gone back for quite a long time, but particularly under the leadership of Declan Kearney, who is our national chairperson. We've been in touch with all the leaders. Well, I was sad to learn that people that we met were killed because there's a personal connection, or you've met someone. It isn't just an anonymous or a media figure. It's a person that you sit down and broke bread with and had discussions with. And generally, my experience was that they were positive. They wanted to find a way.
Who were they at the beginning? Let's start with who were the people you had met and had been associated recently, apart from the name? Like, who else?
Well, the most prominent would have been Ishmael, who we met in Gaza.
Ismail is Ismail Haniyeh, just because of the difference of the pronunciation. So Ismail is Ismail Haniyeh.
Ismail Haniyeh.
Yeah.
We met with Ismail Haniyeh in Gaza. And of course, he was assassinated in the last number of months. And it was a good and positive meeting, and he outlined, and we did our best to promulgate this afterwards, how open he and Hamas were for peace talks, to find a way out of the conflict. He discussed potentially the ability to build a new process and so on. And I was very impressed by what he had to say.
What was you impressed about? What was the talk about?
Well, it was clear to me that, contrary to the propaganda, that the Hamas leadership wanted to find a way, a principled way, a fair way to end the conflict. That was very clear in the course of those discussions, and I said that. The other thing, just to float a thought, I mean, obviously what happened in October the 7th was seized upon by the Israeli government to open up this attack. And I think that what happened on October the 7th was wrong, but I just make that point. Does anybody really imagine that the Israeli intelligence service didn't know in advance? I mean, you had at least 1,000 operatives crossing into those Israeli settlements and so on. But they didn't know in advance.
I don't know.
Well,
so does that mean that you think that they might let it happen?
Well, I think it's a question that needs to be asked. I don't want to come to a conclusion, but I do want to ask the question. You know, how did that happen? How was that? And did the intelligence services not know? With all their surveillance, with all their, I presume they have spies and agents and informers and all the rest of it, that you have such a movement, such a mass mobilization of militants, and they didn't know. So maybe they didn't. So if they didn't know, that's a big question, because that's a failure. And if they did know, and that had happened, then that's another big question. So I don't want to create a distraction here. I just want to record that, right? Because that then unleashed what we have seen, and who benefits, you know, from all of that. Certainly not the ordinary people, certainly not the victims. Responsibility then of the international community, and you have to strip back the position of the U.S. government. You know, the U.S. the war that hopefully, and this is only the beginning. This ceasefire isn't even a cessation. It's only the beginning of a very, very difficult process. But that war was fought, and the Israelis in many ways were proxies for these other Western powers who have a geopolitical reason for trying to retain an influence in that part of the world. And we have to face up to that reality that not only do the Palestinian people, which is a huge challenge, need to have a national platform based upon their right to unity, and they all need to unite, and every action and everything they do needs to be about trying to advance that position. But it also needs to be done globally. It needs to be done within the diaspora. One of the advantages that we in Ireland had is that we have a very strong diaspora. And we have a very strong diaspora, particularly in the United States of America, so we were able to utilize that. The Palestinian people don't have the same influence, but they still have influence, and they still have a diaspora, and they still have friends all over the world. I mean, the South African government has played a leadership role in this. Norway, you could name the different states that have taken up a good position and would be supportive of this, but there's also a responsibility upon international fora, whether it's United Nations or other bodies, to uphold the demand, uphold the right of self-determination. Well, obviously there needs to be a huge increase in aid, and there needs to be a huge effort to reconstruct what has been destroyed. But I tend to take, if I may say so, almost a cynical view of that, as I do over the amount of munitions and armaments that were put in. The arms industry benefits from that. If you want to know who benefits, there's one element that benefits. And similarly, others will benefit from the reconstruction of Gaza. I mean, I was shocked a way back to discover that the money that was going in for the reconstruction of Gaza, before it was devastated as much as it was devastated, was being paid through Israel. That's disgraceful.
Business.
No, but the money going in from the international was being siphoned in through Israel. So there's a huge onus, and I say this in the most fraternal way, and very mindful of their challenges, on the Palestinian leaders and leaderships to come together and to take and to assume as much control over as many of these issues as possible. That they don't need others to be mediating on their part on those issues that you've referred to, the reconstruction of Gaza. They also, imagine the trauma. We had a conflict here, which thankfully has come to an end. But the effects intergenerationally will be felt for decades. Imagine what it's going to be like for those people who have been on the receiving end of the conflict, in that 14, 15-month period. That's just the trauma, it's inexplicable. You couldn't describe how that's going to affect people. So there is a onus on the international community to redeem itself. Now, having said that, there have been players on the international stage who have been very brave, who have stood up, who have tried to use their organizations to do the right thing. And anytime I went there, I was always uplifted by the number of people from the West, including Irish people, who were in there doing solidarity work, who were in there doing good work, trying to help people. So they're the ones whose example should be followed by the leaders. If this ceasefire, which, or whatever, however you might describe it, comes into being, which the presumption is that it will, but it will be very, very imperfect. It will be very, very challenging, and it's only the beginning. And it isn't just to try and repair the damage that has been done. It's also to try and make sure that the outcome is going to be one which gives the people of Palestine their right to freedom and their right to a state and their right to live peacefully with their neighbours on the basis of equality and fairness. Yeah, I mean, if you could separate yourself from the awfulness of what is happening, just the sheer, like I watched a little child of 3 being pulled out of the rubble last night on the television screen. We're actually witnessing the genocide on our iPhones. We're seeing it. It's horrible. It's so if you could just suspend your horror at that for a moment, the audacity of Israeli spokespersons, just the sheer audacity to say the things that they're saying, to argue the case that they're arguing, to confront the Irish government because Ireland has taken an independent position, which Ireland is entirely entitled to do, and it's a lesson just in just sheer determination not to listen to any other argument, not to listen to any other point of view.
Can
So the Irish government recently recognised the state of Palestine. But in 2014, the Irish Parliament passed a motion, I actually proposed a motion, that the Parliament should recognise the state of Palestine. It took 10 years. It took 10 years to get that done. And one presumes that that was partly due to the complexion of the Irish governments in that period, but also because they would be under pressure internationally not to do that. Because they used to say, we want to wait until we get the rest of the European states in place. And we were saying, no, you have to show leadership. You don't need to wait for anybody. Go and do it. So one can presume that there is pressure, and you just have to stand up to that pressure. It's the right thing to do. What's the choice? You support war, or you support a peaceful settlement which brings everybody as their entitlement and to the ability to live their life based upon fairness and decency and equality. Moment that with the new administration coming in, with President Trump being the new president, that with some of his more protectionist policies, and because there is a lot of inward investment, there's also a lot of Irish investment in America, but there's a lot of inward investment in Ireland, that could be used, and that the Zionist lobby will try to use its support or its muscle to make an example of Ireland. Now, it won't work, because I think the majority of people here are firmly of the view that we want peace in the Middle East, and we want the rights of the Palestinian people restored, and we want everybody to go forward in harmony and with equality. So I don't think it'll work in the longer term. There's also, you see, a big responsibility on Irish governments, and arguably, on the surface, Irish governments in recent times have been quite good or very good. I mean, the Taoiseach, Bertie Ahern, had a very good relationship with Yasser Arafat, with the Palestinian president. Visited him in Gaza, visited him a number of times, received them here in Ireland. But a lot of that came after ages of agitation and campaigning and lobbying. Well, we have consistently, and for a very long time, and when I was leader of the party, with every American president that I met, I argued that they should be facilitating, encouraging, developing dialogue. Dialogue is central to getting progress from war into peace, into democracy. It's just central. You cannot say we're not going to talk to him or we're not going to talk to her. You have to have dialogue as the primary way of moving forward. So Mary Lou McDonald, who's the president of Sinn Féin, has raised us, as has Michelle O'Neill, with Starmer and with his predecessors, the need for the British government to stop arming the Israelis, to stop supporting them with munitions and funding and so on and so forth, and also to encourage a peace process through dialogue. And that should be an inclusive process.
And through your time as a party leader, who was the politician or the leader, American or British, that really you felt that it might lead a good dialogue or had led a good dialogue
Well, I suppose President Clinton would say that he came closest to anyone. I have doubts about that because of the way the Palestinians were left with the division of their territory between the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. But anyway, that's another day's work. You see, the Palestinians don't have much influence. They're poor people, and that's the reason why they don't have much influence. Israel is a significant world power. It's a nuclear power. It's backed by most of the Western big states. And in Europe, a lot of the European states are former colonial powers themselves. So there's an affinity between the British government, the American government, and many of the others, Germany and France and so on, with the Israeli government, with the state of Israel. When you consider, and I haven't been in the Middle East in over 10 years, at least over 10 years. Right?
You have visited the Middle East so many times as well.
Yes, but how much worse has it become?
Yeah, absolutely.
Since the last time I was there. When you consider the international community, all you have to demand of the international community is that they uphold international law. Simple, right? So otherwise, what is it there for, if it isn't to uphold international law?
But where is the international law?
Well, that's my point exactly. The separation wall was built in total defiance of international law. The settlements were created in total defiance of international law. The siege of Gaza before the latest episode is in defiance of international law. The denying people the right to food, to water, all of these normal requirements for the human people to survive, all of that's in defiance of international law. So that's even before you get to atrocities and before you get to bombings of civilian targets and before you get to the killing of children and so on. So the international community has a huge responsibility for what's wrong. And the American government, in particular, in the way that it has armed and actively endorsed the war against the people of Palestine, is just absolutely shameful.
So, how many times have you visited Palestine specifically? As far as you know?
4 or 5 times. 4 or 5 times.
And how many leaders you met, and who's?
Well, we took a position which might not have been entirely popular, that we would not just meet people from the Palestinian section, but we would also meet any Israeli civic or other leaders who were prepared to meet with us.
Okay.
And the last big visit that we did, which included a visit to Gaza, we spent a couple of nights in Gaza. That I found was very edifying, because of all of the Israeli folks that we met, from former members of the Israeli Defense Forces to people in civic society to people in some of the political parties. The government refused to meet with us. All of the people we met wanted peace. And all of the people that we met had a sense of the shape of it, of a two-state outcome. They basically, I mean, 1 or 2 people actually said to us in the course of our discussions, everybody knows what the outcome has to be. It has to be for the Palestinians and the Israelis to live peacefully together on the basis of equality. Now, they may have been very progressive Israeli people, but nonetheless, it did show that there is or there was at that time, things have perhaps hardened since then, but did show that there was a big constituency in Israel for peace and peace based upon
Israeli citizens.
yes, the ones that we met. No, I don't. I don't think they're controlling the narrative. I think they're controlling the establishment narrative. But why are there mobilizations across Britain? No matter what is going on within the Parliament or within the government, why are so many people marching in support of the Palestinian people, or marching in support of peace in the Middle East? In the States and the USA, you know, the number of people who come out on marches and who raise their voices and who it's everywhere. Yeah, but what I'm answering is they control the establishment narrative, but despite that, at popular level, people want peace, and people want an outcome which is based upon the rights of everybody involved, but particularly the rights of the people of Palestine now.